Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering you the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeve. Support the show by using the code MagicMics at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Ruben Bressler.
Hi, hello.
MTG Nerd Girl.
Guys,
swapping it up, keeping it.
Yeah, I got named first.
That's right.
I was surprised.
I'll do that sometimes because I wasn't looking at the script. All right.
Okay.
That's all right. I was like, names in that order. We did it.
Someone is a name. Yep. Great.
We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 worst cards of 2021, Ruben.
Well, here's another name for you, Vegan Economist, aka Daniel N. Tompkins, who writes, Diamond Lion. WotC managed a total flop on a card referencing one of the most powerful and expensive cards in Magic's history with this unplayable rare. Oh yeah, even whiffed on the name. Diamond Eyes Lion, anyone? Easily one of the worst cards of 2021.
Yeah, this card sucks. Diamond Lion is a 2 generic mana, rare 2/2 artifact creature cat with tap, discard your hand, sacrifice Diamond Lion, add 3 mana of any one color, activate only as an instant. And what? Why? Why did they do this? What?
Yeah, I mean, they gave us Lion's Eye Diamond on a 2/2 for 2, and it didn't pan out. I mean,
at least make it a 1 mana 1/1, right? Like at least like sort of have that sort of combo-y 1 mana, do the thing and whatever. But making it 2 mana just kind of kills it.
I guess. I mean, I don't know where it fell apart for us here. I mean, obviously free is insane.
No, yeah.
I don't know if this card is playable as a 1 mana 1/1. I don't know where this is playable at, like what the numbers have to be for this to be playable, unless it's 0 mana.
What if it was 0 mana? What if it was literally 0, like a 0/1, 0 mana? Like it has to tap and just, to do its thing. So it has to live a whole turn. And even that is probably awful. But I also feel like we're sort of arguing over this type of thing where either the card is like busted or crap, Yeah. It's kind of one of those designs.
I agree that this card was just disappointing.
Yeah.
And you figure that there are enough slots for each type of rare as far as like, bomb, filler rare, they're always going to be there. Now, I do like the idea that their filler rares have some flavor. I agree that this one in particular would have been nice if it was playable or a bit more relevant. But again, also I don't want my filler rares to just have nothing, to be blanks that make no sense, that have nothing to do with anything. So a little bit of a, give and take here, I think.
Yeah, there's ways they could have made it more exciting, and there's ways it could be more interesting. I agree with the name. Really, you didn't want to call it Diamond Eyes? Was that a real problem? I didn't.
Yeah.
Just such an easy miss on that one. It seems really weird. Either way, thanks, Daniel, for being a part of the show. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Hit up Reddit, Facebook, all that good stuff. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate, because it's time to talk about the top 10 red cards on Arena. I'll see most of y'all in the sidelines because I got 4 hires.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I ended up with 2.
3.
Yeah, so we're a little bit on each other, but not entirely so. I think that, we've got a little bit of overlap.
Well, we're going to start with our number 10 because mine's higher on somebody else's list. Ruben, do you have a number 10?
I do, and it's a good thing to start with because once we've done the introduction and we've opened the curtains, it's time to light up the stage.
Nice.
Light Up the Stage is a 2 generic and a red sorcery with Spectacle of a red. You may cast this spell for its Spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. You exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. As soon as this was printed in Ravnica Allegiance, it changed the way red decks were built. It encouraged us to play kind of crappy 1/1s for 1, because we always wanted to trigger that Spectacle on turn 2. So we were, there were good 1/1s for 1. We had access to, what was the Monkey Pirate that had haste? the monkey pirate before Ragavan, the one that could sacrifice to deal damage.
Right.
That guy was fine. Tin Street Dodger was, I guess, okay, but we were playing some pretty garbage cards there for a second, like to just get the spectacle to trigger.
Honestly, the card advantage, even when this was in standard, was super important because you just need to hand your opponent 7.5 cards to burn them out, essentially. And then the other creatures had ETBs. There was a 2/1 goblin that ETB'd, dealt 2 damage as well, making this card super relevant. But oftentimes, I just wanted to shock their face, draw 2 more shocks, and shock them. And that could close out games very, very quickly. Also, Chain Whirler Goblin at the time had an ETB that dealt damage to creatures and 1 to the face, triggering the spectacle. So it was really easy to deal with and kept your foot on the gas in these red decks.
Now, I think this was the first time. I could be wrong, but before this, red was getting, it was hard to give red card advantage. And so what they had basically come to was, okay, we'll let you look at the top cards, or 1 or X cards at the top of your library. You can play them this turn. That's your advantage. You only get it right now, but that's cool. They made some Chandras that did stuff like that or whatever. And I'm pretty sure this is the first one that ever said until your end of your next turn, not until end of turn, which is what I initially read it that way, because I'm like, oh, this is the red, weird draw thing of the set. Like, no, it turned it from just like a really cool sort of red divination to a red divination for 1 mana, which was bananas crazy, because who cares if they see what you're drawing? Oh, a mountain and the 2/1 that shocks you, like, oop, you got me, like, whatever. But Light of the Stage really did change red decks to give them a forward card advantage they've never had before. Like, getting that extra turn just changes everything, and that's what made it awesome. All right, Nerd Girl, what's number 10?
So my number 10 is a card that I gave kind of an honorary slot to. I like cards that are, for these top 10 lists, very impactful across multiple formats. Also, I give them a little bit of bonus points if they can withstand the test of time. Once they rotate out of standard, if they don't mean anything, then they're not really the top 10 cards on Arena. But this one, I think, actually has, even though it's not widely played in many decks, it has formed an archetype all by itself, and that is Indomitable Creativity. This historic card is X red, and it is a sorcery speed spell. Destroy X target artifacts and or creatures. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until an artifact or creature is revealed. Exile that card. Those players put exiled cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle their libraries. This card can instantly end the game by cheating into play multiple Sarah's Emissaries, Nezahals, whatever. It was also one of the major players for the Innistrad Championship and had over a 40% win rate.
Wow, yeah, this is one of those cards that just kind of like, I feel like sort of snuck up on us a little bit.
Yep.
Because the idea is like there's like sort of this tipping point. There's this perfect balance of when are the token makers so good, and when are the giant monsters you can find so good, and when those two things meet, Indomitable Creativity is very, very scary and very effective.
We've had cards that are in line with this do things in standard and in modern before. We've had Madcap Experiment, for example. We've had the
polymorphs of the world, stuff like that.
Yeah, the mass polymorph deck.
Sure.
That its goal was to put a bunch of like Eldrazi Scions into play and turn them into Primeval Titans.
Right.
This is somewhat similar to that, but this one actually goes into a control shell, which I don't know if we've ever really seen before. I guess we've seen Madcap Experiment been used in like Blue Moon, but nothing that was really like a Jeskai control deck that, oh, by the way, also just has like Dwarven Mines in it to trigger Indomitable Creativity, to get your Sarah's Emissaries or whatever, what have you. And that really kind of changed the paradigm of what the historic metagame even really looked like.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that like I'm more or less glad that this exists, because the way it makes its own archetype, it's very unique in the way it plays. Any card that's going to put a creature into play, for free is always going to be kind of scary and exciting. And it's easy to disrupt if you know sort of what you're playing against and what they're trying to do.
And in a pinch, you can get rid of your opponent's stuff.
It's true. It's like that's big and scary, and I'm going to die next turn. Just spin the wheel, get out of here. All right. Let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is one of my 2 hires on somebody else's list.
Ooh, Nerd Girl, what's your number 9?
So my number 9 is a card I chose because it It makes a pretty fun and interesting deck in Historic, but also it was one of the go-to cards in the limited format, which I really enjoyed getting to play. It is a big bomb that just instantly ends games in limited, but then also sees a ton of good play in Historic, and that is Mizzix Mastery.
Ooh.
This sorcery speed 4-mana spell says exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. And then you exile Mizzix Mastery, and for 8 mana, 7 mana, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 mana, you can overload it and cast all the spells in your graveyard. This was seeing a ton of play in Jeskai Control. It was really, really popular to turn 2 pitch a Magma Opus for the treasure and then recast it right away, and was just absolutely terrorizing creature decks for a long time. Isn't seeing quite as much play, but I imagine it will come back once humans take a bit of a hit or a nerf.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is just like, again, I'm sensing a theme with the creativity and the mastery. Let's play some stuff that's really expensive for not as much as their cost, because Mizzix Mastery is just a really dumb card that they just gave you a sweet mythic rare that you can easily discard. Not only easily discard, but helps pay for the freaking mastery on turn 3. Like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing now, because that's a fantastic use of it.
There's also a Dragon Storm deck that's playable, where you discard a Dragon Storm and then target it with your Mizzix Mastery and go get Bladewing the Risens and things like that.
Absolutely.
Super fun. And also, as you were mentioning, this is in the Strixhaven archive. And when you get it and you overload it and rebuy all your learn and lessons from the entire game, well, it turns out the game just ends when you get to cast 45 spells at the same time.
It's just not a fair Magic card, all right? It showed up in Commander.
I think it's perfectly fair. If I'm going to pay 8 mana, I want to win the game immediately.
Let's go. I pay 8 mana, there better be fireworks. Well, for my number 9 here, this is a card that look, what Wizards did for about 20 years was they said, for the first few years, they said, you know what? Fork is unbelievable. Fork is absolutely just ridiculous. And we're going to restrict it. We're going to ban it. You're not going to get fork. No forks for you. And later, they're like, what if you got like just a little fork? Just a little bit, you know? And then when they're like, yeah, it's a treat. Like, what if you got like even more forks? What if we gave you some different forks? Well, what about this kind of fork? What about this other weird fork? What about this other kind of fork that's on like a split card or something, or whatever they're doing? They forked and forked and forked until they forked it up. And we basically have ourselves a combo deck in Historic, thanks to them forking it up with Dualcaster Mage. This card in Neo form is dumb and kind of ridiculous. Dualcaster Mage is 2 red and a generic mana for a rare human wizard. It's a 2/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, you copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And so this in Neo form, and you're just going to find all your stuff and you're copying it and you're going crazy, and it's awesome. But again, that's because they just kept pushing, and they're like, okay, fine. In what was it, Commander set or something? Eternal Masters, this card came out for the first time. So yeah, it was fine. No, that's not true. This is when was this thing first printed? Commander 2014? That sounds about right. So yeah, it's fine. In 2014, they got there.
I like Dualcaster Mage. I hate the Neoform combo. I feel like it is a degenerate combo that fortunately doesn't see any play right now, I don't think.
It doesn't seem to be that good these days, but it was real dumb for a long time.
Yeah, it was real dumb. But the card Dualcaster Mage is very cool.
It's very cool. I mean, it's a nice card. It's neat. It's fun. It's interesting. Maybe there's a world where we have multiplayer on Arena one day, and this will be a terrific card in that format. So either way, let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
So my number 8 is a card that would continue to be a powerhouse were it not banned in both Legacy and Pioneer. This was a card that was on everybody's watch list as soon as it came out. It was a card that people were like, this card is going to break multiple formats, and then it proceeded to do so. My number 8 is Underworld Breach.
Oh, God, this card.
Generic and a red enchantment gets you each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. Its escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. You may cast cards from your graveyard for their escape costs. And at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. This was a combo wombo immediately with Blasting Station, which allowed you to mill yourself for 3 cards. And so you could mill your entire deck. Underworld Breach, and because of the Blasting Station trigger, it milled your entire deck and got you a Thassa's Oracle, which you could then cast with your Underworld Breach and immediately win. It was also a Storm variant, allowing you to rebuy all of those cheap cantrips by exiling fetch lands and whatnot. And also just a good card for value. I mean, listen, I would be lying if I had told you that I didn't just cast like a Yawgmoth's Will to get a fetch land and a cantrip just to have some value. And Underworld Breach has done that in the past as well.
Yeah, this isn't something that I saw really. We weren't really playing it much in limited, but it did some tricky things in constructed, certainly.
Like, I'm glad, I'm literally glad it's starting to get more expensive, and that like this card was like $1 or $2 rare or something for so long. And I'm like, this card cannot do what it says on it and it not be semi-busted all to hell in a whole variety of ways. And obviously the older formats, it most certainly was basically immediately. This is like, there's a lot of times where I'll read red cards, Flames of the Past or whatever style, and I'll go like, are you serious? Have you read this card? This card is insane. And like, they're like, well, break it. And so then people do, and then they ban it, and they're like, well, you were right. And I was like, okay, did I need to
this
be?
This one was an interesting one.
Ooh.
And I'm glad that they gave it a shot, but it was very, like, as soon as it came out, people were like, this should be twice as much.
This is insane. I know, it was nuts. Either way. Nerd Girl, what's number 8?
So my number 8 is first of 3 hires.
Ew. Well, let me tell you, my number 8 is higher, my number 7 is higher, and my number 6 is my last higher. So I will see you guys in number 5. Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is a card that I am desperately and madly in love with. I have cast this card more than I ever thought that I would ever cast a 4-mana enchantment in my life in Standard, and I was desperately and madly in love every time I played it, because I would play these. I'd go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop. Well, my hand's empty. Guess what? Experimental Frenzy.
Woo!
Oh, we did it. Experimental Frenzy is 3 generic and a red for an enchantment that says you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. You can't play lands or cast spells from your hand, and you can pay 4 mana to destroy Experimental Frenzy. Turns out coffee is the weird aunt of invention. I love Experimental Frenzy. It's everything I want to be doing. Instead of refilling my hand like some weird divine favor, instead of doing any of the, I would still play Light Up the Stage, but Experimental Frenzy just says you can play your entire deck.
Yeah, unless you get lucky and hit double lands or whatever. But I also like the idea that, unlike normal traditional card draw, like you said, refilling your hand, where you're like, okay, draw 4 cards, then they, board clear you one more time, you're done. This, I like to just kind of hoard up the cards in my hand until I have a huge hand, and then you can crack it and then just continue to dump more stuff out, which is always really, really nifty. Or you don't even need to do that. You don't need to blow it up, because they're going to need to eventually. And by the time they do, I'm sitting on all sorts of stuff again. So it really gives red the extra oomph that it needs.
Like, I know, we're looking back, the hindsight is 2020. It is clear this card is absolutely bananas. This card is huge. This card crushed. It was great. When it first showed up, there were a lot of question marks. They're like, this card seems like we're not going to be able to play anything. Wow, this card seems, risky. And then you got to pay mana to get rid of it. And blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, obviously, it's one of those cards that kind of reads a little questionable, but plays unbelievable. So it's easy to lot on the praise now. But I remember when Experimental Frenzy was like, are you sure you want to play that? I'm like, pretty sure.
100% agree.
Nerd Girl, what's number 7?
My second of 3 hires.
Aha. Well, we're just burning through them hires real fast, ain't we? On to number 6, my final hire. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is the last of my hires.
I can carry.
Do it. Let's go.
Good.
Ruben carried last one. I'll carry this one.
Awesome.
So my number 6 to keep us going is a card. I don't think on its own it defines any sort of archetype, but it is very widely played. So I thought it deserved a spot on the list. It also gets a ton of play in Brawl. So again, a very important, influential card that can be put into basically any red deck. And that is Chandra, Torch of Defiance.
Nice.
This 4-mana planeswalker has multiple modes and comes into play with 4 loyalty. For the first +1, you can exile the top card of your library. You may cast that card. If you don't, Chandra, Torch of Defiance deals 2 damage to each opponent. I opened this up in a 2 HG paper game, and oh my god, 10 out of 10 recommend.
I like it.
The other +1 is add 2 mana to your mana pool. -3, Torch of Defiance deals 4 damage to target creature. -7, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell. This emblem deals 5 damage to target creature or player. So now all of your spells just come with a built-in lava axe. And again, this is in any single Brawl red deck. It's being played as a 1 of or 2 of in a lot of red decks in all sorts of Eternal formats.
And for what it's worth, this was made before they just let you target planeswalkers, and has been updated to that the last
Target
ability can
anybody.
target anybody, which is nice. But
The first ability still only hits players, though.
correct. That will still only hit players. You can't redirect the damage any longer. I don't even think you could back then, could you?
No, you couldn't.
No.
Well, no, you could back then.
Back
You
then
can
was-
no longer.
Well, there you go. So but this is the idea that they hadn't made a 4 ability planeswalker in a while. I think the last one was Garrick. Was that correct? The 7 mana
believe
Garrick.
You're right. 7 mana Garrick or 8 mana Nicol Bolas, the first 8 mana Nicol Bolas.
Right, perhaps. Yeah. So this one, and so it was a pretty big deal. I mean, Jace the Mind Sculptor had been a while ago and had rocked Magic thoroughly. And this rocked Magic, but didn't upset anything. And again, it's not that Jace necessarily broke everything, but it did get banned for a reason. And Chandra, Torch of Defiance was great, but was not, you had to ban it great.
Solid mid-range planeswalker. It saw play in aggro decks. It saw play in mid-range decks. It saw play in control decks. It even sees some amount of play in Eternal formats as your like Dragon Stompy planeswalker sometimes when they build those kind of decks. I love Chandra, Torch of Defiance. It's my favorite red planeswalker.
Nice. Let's move on here to number 5. I'm going to take the first number 5. Let's go.
Fine.
It's time. I had to skip 3 different freaking cards. And so for this one, this card is like, this card hurt my soul. Like this one was like, you read it and you're like, are you serious? I couldn't believe the words on this card. And turns out it got banned in Legacy because it was absolutely insane. And it has its own archetype with another card we may or may not talk about. I don't know. But like Dreadhorde Arcanist is not a fair Magic card. It does a whole bunch of busted, stupid stuff. It's a red and generic mana. It's a rare from War of the Spark. It's a 1/3 zombie wizard with trample, because you need your 1 power guys to have trample.
Sure.
Whenever it attacks, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to Dreadhorde Arcanist's power from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. Oh, that wonderful phrase. If that card will be put into your graveyard this turn, you exile it instead. This thing is bananas. It's card advantage up one side and down the other. It's number 7 for Nerd Girl. Clearly, because this is like, it's, I don't know, the best 2 mana red guy they've made in a long time in a history of making good 2 mana red guys.
So Arcanist here, the reason it made my list, it wasn't a super all-star when it was in standard. It was seeing some play in Feather, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But now it is actually kind of insane. I know one of the teams took it to the Innistrad Championship. It had over a 59% win rate here.
Nice.
Turn 2 or Thought Season to Arcanist is absolutely nutty.
Right.
It's seeing play.
That Thought Season's coming on turn 3.
Yeah,
and
there's many formats.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in connection with Brainstorm is its big, and other blue 1 mana cantrips, is its big selling point for why it's banned in Legacy. I think that I don't agree that it does nothing fair. In fact, I think that this is an extremely fair Magic card. But then again, so is Deathrite Shaman, and that card also needed to be banned, right? Like there are scales to fair,
Sure.
and I think that Dreadhorde Arcanist is, you know, it's a 2-mana creature that does nothing the turn you play it, which is that's Tarmogoyf, right? Like it's not as busted as some other 2-mana creatures I can think of that are highly played in Legacy, but. If you untap with it, it is basically impossible to lose. Like it's better than every other of those cards because every single time it attacks, it gets card advantage. Yeah. So just being able to constantly rebuy Ponders and Preordains and Gitaxian Probes and all that kind of, and not to mention Bolt. Is out of this world.
Yeah, I mean it's very, very good, and it's one of those cards that, like, War of the Spark was just so chock full of crazy stuff that he kind of got lost in the shuffle because, again, not that great in Standard, but it takes older formats to really shine. And Historic is just every cheap spell is going to be better in the Arcanist deck as time goes on because that's just kind of how it works.
It was seeing some play in Standard as an alternate win condition in the Feather deck. So like the Feather Flyer was a little hard to cast. It was like 3 specific mana colors, and there's obviously only 4 of them in your deck. Sometimes you don't draw them. So this was a nice 4 of backup for sure in those decks.
There you go. Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5 is one of my favorite cards that has ever been printed in Magic the Gathering. It made me so happy when it was printed because I was like, finally, we have a thing that makes me excited to play an archetype that I haven't played in over 10 years. And then the archetype was good, and people were calling for this card to be banned because Goblins was too good in Historic because they printed Muxus, Goblin Grandee.
Let's go.
I love Muxus so much. Jumpstart rare, legendary creature, Goblin Noble for 6 mana gets you a 4/4 that says when Muxus, Goblin Grandee enters the battlefield, reveal the top 6 cards of your library, put all Goblin creature cards with mana value 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest from the bottom of your library in a random order. Whenever Muxus attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other goblin you control. This revolutionized the Goblin deck. Yes, the entire Goblin deck kind of changed into a play Muxus on turn 3 deck. People started playing cards like Wily Goblin and Phyrexian Tower, cards that would never see play in a traditional, you know, Goblin Lackey, Goblin Ringleader style Goblins deck, just so that they could play Muxus as soon as possible.
This was my number 6.
This was on my short list, but I ended up cutting it because it's not seeing quite as much play and is really only in the one deck.
Yeah.
But I really like this card, and I think it's kind of the master of this really weird polarizing feeling. It's either play it, win the game, or play it and then bitch about, be very angry about how you didn't hit a haste goblin. Like I have 12 of them in my deck. How did I miss or whatever? And then it's either win the game or on the spot, or, you know, whiffing on a Muxus is one of the most
real bad,
soul crushing things you could possibly do. And it's a great card.
This was my number 6 because you know what? We play Magic to feel things. I play Magic to feel things. And so there's you know what? It's just like, there's people out there who are crazy and they go to casinos once every couple of years and they'll bet every bit of, you know, all of their money in their life on whatever, black or red, go, and they win or they lose. And it's a thing that they have this emotional experience about. So if I whiff on Muxus, emotional experience, negative. Sure. If I hit like nuts and Krinko and the haste, like it's just the sickest feeling. Just so
Chieftain, Goblin, Krenko Prospector, and you're just like, oh, I have another Muxus. Let's spin the wheel again.
It's just, I feel things. This card makes me feel things, and I love it. And if Goblins is the best deck, then deal with it. Like, really?
Yeah.
Good. That's awesome. Let Goblins be the best deck. Nerd Girl, what's number 5?
So my number 5, it's probably a little too high because I feel like it's a little new and it's terrorizing things right now. So I feel like I might have given it a little bit too much credit than I probably should have, but it is a very good card and needs a nerf, I think, and is only an uncommon. It's real rare that we need to nerf an uncommon here, and that is Fearsome Whelp.
Oh, wow.
This new Alchemy 2-drop is a 1/1 dragon for only 2 mana, a colorless and a red. It has flying. And at the beginning of your end step, each dragon card in your hand perpetually gains. This costs 1 colorless less to cast. And in a world where we have infinite 4 mana dragons and
5 mana dragons.
And the 5 mana Goldsband Dragon and things like that, it is insane. And when you are on the play, your opponent doesn't even get a chance to kill this. Like, they have a shock or bust. There's really nothing else that they could kill this with on turn 1. It's an end step, not an upkeep trigger. So you're going to be casting your Town Razor Dragon on turn 3. With you being on the play, your opponent is already dead. This card is kind of nuts.
Yeah, you got the shock, you got the play with fire, or you got the land with the 1 damage thing on the back of it.
Or you hazard,
right? Or you've probably lost the game. And I've had this from both sides. I've played the dragon deck with the Fearsome Whelps and just crushed. And like when you have a second one, oh my god, like it just gets really filthy. And this is one of those cards that I think is also difficult to kind of to balance correctly. Like maybe it needs to be a 3 mana 2/2 flyer or something,
or trigger on upkeep.
Or trigger on upkeep, right? Give people a little bit of time to deal with it, because damn,
they could nerf it like they did Luminarch Ascension, of just like, you don't get it the first turn, right? I mean, once again though, if dragons is good, like I'm okay with that. Like I like it when tribal cards are good, because they make me feel good, and especially when it's an iconic tribe like a dragon,
right?
You know, giving them something cheap that is a good early play that isn't just removal, feels good to me.
Right. You have to sort of say to yourself, you know, like there was a world that existed where spells were like stupid crazy good, and you could be stone rained to death, you know, and you could be Mind's Desired out of nowhere, and you could be watching Magic and have someone go, what the hell just happened here? And you have to like sit them down and like draw a little chart and tell them how the thing, and this is how high tide works, you know. But you know, sometimes it's like, well, they just swung in with a 4/4 monster and killed them. Good. Great.
This little dragon made this big dragon come. Yeah. So here it is.
Here we go.
And then we did it. That's it. And that's easy to explain.
Exactly.
And I like it. I like it when dragons are good.
Yeah.
I do too. It's flavorful. It's very cool. We are red players as well, Ruben, so we might be slightly biased here.
That's true.
Well,
but
you know,
with that said, you're right. It probably deserves enough. This is probably too good.
Right. I mean, I think there was one thing, you know, that wasn't really mentioned in the Gifts Ungiven video for Mystic Studies, which they was talking about. And the design of it is just not what Wizards does anymore. Like that design is just not going to come back. Factor Fiction is just not going to come back. They don't like these designs that are like super thinky and like really complex and create really complex decisions that, you know, could be better solved to be more straightforward. So really interesting stuff. Let's move on here to number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
Number 4 is another of these cards that's just like, well, I've played this card, I have won the game. And when I'm playing against this card, I always know that my opponent is like, well, I guess it's pretty obvious that my opponent has an Ember Cleave if they're attacking with all these little idiots into my 3/3s. I guess I lose. Ember Cleave is 4 generic red for legendary artifact equipment with flash. This spell costs a generic less to cast for each attacking creature you control. When Ember Cleave enters the battlefield, you attach it to target creature you control. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample, and it equips for 3 generic, just in case you already have one in play. So basically you go 1-drop, turn 2, 2 1-drops, turn 3. There's your 3 mana, your 3 attackers. Ember Cleave, GG.
Yeah, this made my short list. I didn't put it on because it hasn't really kind of made the transition into any of the Eternal formats, really. It's still a good card in Singleton and stuff like that, so we're seeing it some. But the thing I like most about this card is it's legendary, but it still kind of works in multiples because of the flash mechanic. So if you get this in play and they somehow still survive, and you're just like, okay, make the blocks that make you not dead, and then they block everything to the Ember Cleave creature, whatever that is, and you just like kind of juke them and put it onto the other creature. And then what are they going to do? Like a whole bunch of nothing. This thing terrorized Standard for a very long time, and most people are very happy to see it go.
Look, we got, this is the Fairy Tale set. This is Excalibur. They got Ember Cleave Excalibur. It's very neat. I appreciate how they made that work. Excalibur is an overpowered piece of junk. It's just really stupidly crazy, stupidly good. And, you know, sometime like Ember Cleave existing in the format made other cards playable, more playable. There was that card that destroyed an artifact on an adventure. Remember that guy, the 2-mana 2/1 guy? He was way better. But it also gave red a bit more, you know, sort of gave it more reach, gave more sort of an explosiveness that was kind of fun. And again, I think it got a little oversaturated, but just like as Magic's want to do, once everybody's playing Ember Cleave, you know how to fight it. You just bring in artifact hate and more creature removal, and ta-da, you've solved
just
it.
play more Doom Blades and you'll be able to handle it. Like this is how we win.
Yeah. So for what they wanted to do, I think with this was cool. They made a weapon that's very scary and powerful and great as a mythic rare, and I will take that. All right, let's move on here to number 4 for Nerd Girl. What you got?
My last of 3 hires.
Aha. Well, I guess I'll just have to carry the weight here. Move on here to our number 4. This is a card that it got a lot of chitter chatter over the past year, because not only was this card great, and this card's been great ever since it's been printed back in the day, it's so stupidly good that, hey, there's a cattail, that modern has banned this card, but mainly it was the artwork refresh for Faithless Looting that had us talking about it. Faithless Looting is 1 red mana for a rare sorcery. It's rare in the Strixhaven Mystical Archive. Otherwise, it's just common. It's a usually common sorcery that says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and has flashback of a red and 2 generic mana. So with that said, the artwork was unbelievably jarring. I think one of the most jarring pieces I'd ever seen, where it'd been a long time since someone had said, here's a new Magic card, and I said, I don't believe you. I don't believe that is the actual artwork. Like, I just straight up don't believe it. Like, Wizards had to come out and say, yes, this is real. Like, no joke, they had to do that because so many people said, you are trolling us with this artwork. Love it or hate it, I'd never seen a Magic card that looked like that before.
Yeah. And what's odd is that the same artist, Casey Mazur, did the Mystical Archive to Harmonize as well.
Right.
And nobody said the same thing about Harmonize. It was just like the combination of the
stark colors,
sort of like the stark colors, the black eyes, like sort of some combination was like, that doesn't look like a Magic card. This was my number 6.
Nice.
Faithless Looting has been spectacular since day one. I mean,
my 8.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's banned for a reason. It was the backbone of multiple decks, from Mardu Pyromancer to Phoenix to Black Red Reanimator. As soon as we saw that they printed a better Careful Study, which, by the way, Careful Study is a legacy playable Magic card.
It's true. They
printed Careful Study with flashback in red. What else can you say?
Yep. This was, I mean, partly, banned in Modern and stuff too, kind of took out my Vengevine deck, which I was very, very sad about, but agreed on the art. I think what it is for me is that it's 2 different styles of art, because the person, like the skin and the flesh, is very detailed and almost looks like a photograph, versus the like outfit and stuff that is flat colored and doesn't show any depth or anything. So it's very, very jarring. I struggled with this too.
Yeah,
because I'm not trying to crap on this artist and saying that they did a terrible job or anything. I'm saying that it was just not what you saw in Magic cards, and it was so different. And you're like,
and that's saying a lot considering how much we see on Magic cards these days.
Yeah.
This is very abstract art. Now that kind of worked for the Mystical Archives, because a lot of the Mystical Archives still have that stained glass window, like line graphics and stuff. But then with the person in there, it really just really off.
Yeah,
I would have liked to have seen a reprint of Stasis with the original art in the Mystical Archive, just to give people an example of what art looks like. Let's get an entirely abstract art set.
I mean, that sounds like a secret lair to me. Let's go.
I love it.
All right.
Didn't this card get a ban though? Not because it was too good, because I mean it was in the format forever and nobody ever thought of anything until Hogak came around, right?
Yeah.
And then it kind of like died for Hogak's sins, I think.
Yeah,
sounds
it did
about
kind
right.
of. Yeah, it did, but it also died for Phoenix's sins.
Right.
Because Phoenix totally went away when this card was banned.
Yeah.
But also this was a card along the lines of Mox Opal, where they, Mox Opal was around forever. And then someday they were just like, you know what? You've had enough time. It's time for you to go to the bench now. And there was a time when Ancient Stirrings was on that list as well, when they were like, I don't know if, Days is kind of in that place in Legacy, where it's like, is this card too good? We could probably get rid of you, and no one would really complain.
Man, maybe one day they'll ban Brainstorm. Maybe one.
No,
day.
they won't.
Maybe one
They,
day.
they simply will not.
You don't know.
People love that card.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
There would be riots in the street.
There's a lot of nevers I hear in
pitchforks.
Magic. They would never do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, well.
Okay. All right. But we're to number 3. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card that is pretty new. It came out in Modern Horizons, and then immediately had an impact everywhere it's seen play. And then they reprinted it in Jumpstart Historic Horizons, which means that it is available online. And I play it primarily in the Shaman's deck, which has a surprising amount of grind to it. Because you've got like your Elvish Visionaries, you've got the 3 colorless mana changeling that seeks a creature out of your deck, and then it's got this card, and it just allows you to like keep grinding with these control decks, which is really why you want Seasoned Pyromancer in your deck. It's not just a powerful card on the front end; it gives you so many different avenues of play. Seasoned Pyromancer is generic red for a 2/2 human shaman. When it enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. For each non-land card discarded this way, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. And while it's in your graveyard, you can pay 5 and exile it to make 2 1/1 elemental creature tokens. So on the front end, when you cast it, you can make 4 power for 3 mana and also filter away some stuff you're not using. Or you can get rid of some lands if you're flooded and get 2 new cards. Or if you are hellbent, if you have no cards in your hand, you can just draw 2 cards. If your hand is empty, it doesn't say if you discard 2 cards, draw 2 cards. No. This is discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards. Then on the back end, after you get wrathed or whatever, you can wait until your opponent's end step, exile it, and get 2 1/1s to pressure your opponent's planeswalkers or finish up the job. This card does everything that you could possibly want to do.
I'm a little surprised that this has made it quite so high up your list. Like, I feel like this card had a lot of hype and kind of didn't quite hit the mark on a lot of spots.
I don't know, man.
I mean,
it's $30. Like,
is it really? Well, it was originally in
Modern Horizons, the first one.
Modern Horizons.
It's only been printed twice.
Yeah.
Well, only been printed in paper once.
Oh, that's true.
Otherwise, it's Historic Horizons. So, yeah, it's a $30 mythic. I think partly because you don't play 1 copy. You play 4 or you play 0. This was my number 7 because like the thing is insane. There's so much value. There's the sickness when there's the Shaman's deck. The fact that you draw 2 when you're hellbent is amazing. The fact it's got that sort of back end ability for no great reason is also amazing. Like, fantastic. I love it. There's just value coming and going with this card.
I do agree with you, though, that it is not as earth-shattering as you might expect. But for the cards that were in the first Historic Horizons, this one is one of the few that has maintained its trajectory since coming out in the initial Historic Horizons. And we'll see if it's in the Modern Horizons. And we'll see if it's able to continue. It came, Mardu Pyromancer exists because this card exists. Obviously, that deck isn't as popular as it once was. Shamans isn't exactly the best deck in Historic, but this is a card that will continue to have an impact.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still see his play in a lot of decks. And again, I really like it for the redraw at the end. I just didn't think it was quite like as impactful in the format.
Yeah.
But I most certainly could be wrong. I don't play a ton in those formats.
This is a card that like it just has a lot of different, it just does a lot of weird stuff. You know what I mean? And like Pyromancer was around before this card existed. I mean, the young Pyromancer deck existed before this existed. It just kind of supercharged it. Like it's exactly what it wanted at the time for a whole variety of reasons. You have flashback.
This is a way to get those Vengevines into your graveyard.
Absolutely. It's
Sure.
the way to get all sorts of cool stuff in your graveyard and get sort of paid off for it. And so, and it's a terrific top deck. I mean, there's a whole variety of ways this card is fantastic. And that's why it was my number 7. All right, let's move here to Nerd Girls number 3. What you got?
So my number 3 is a card. I actually don't think it'll withstand the test of time. It's not seeing a ton of play in historic or more eternal formats right now, but I like it on my list because it's super impactful for Alchemy and Standard right now. And also, one of the things I like the most about it is it's being played in a huge range of decks, not just one particular archetype like aggro or control or whatever. And that is the classic Goldsband Dragon. This 5 mana 4/4 dragon creature with flying and haste. Whenever Goldsband Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures you control have tapped, sacrifice the artifact, add 2 mana of any color instead of the 1. So even though this got a nerf in historic, it's still seeing massive play. It's huge in standard. It's, kind of enabling the Epiphany decks, but it's also seeing play in things like Rakdos dragons. So, I mean, we're seeing it in aggressive creature strategies as well as more controlling decks that aren't running any creatures except for this. It's just kind of enabling all of those other mechanics of your deck. So it's super versatile and seeing a ton of play.
It's a $30 dragon. Like this card is bananas. This thing, like, well, first of all, treasure tokens are like just blowing up all over Commander, and they love the treasure tokens, and it's great. This thing has value. This thing doubles your mana. Like this thing is amazing in any sort of constructed deck. It's amazing in casuals, main constructed. It's a dragon. People care about dragons. Like it checks so many boxes. A $30 mythic, I am not surprised, and will probably stay that way. I wouldn't expect a huge dip when it leaves standard because this is the type of card that just players love forever. This will always be loved in what it does.
When they print a 5 mana hasty dragon, pick it up. Like that's the bottom line. Like Goldsband Dragon, Glorybringer, Stormbreath Dragon.
Yeah. This card started at like $10, $10 to $12, I think was kind of where it started. And it just, and I don't think it's coming down. Like the card is also just great.
Cool dragons sell packs. So this will continue to see play.
People like cool dragons. Well, look.
Also, it combos really fun with mutate creatures. I don't know if you've ever mutated onto a Goldsband Dragon before, but it targets the Goldsband Dragon, which gives you more treasures, which is hilarious.
Not cool. Look, if we're playing with dragons, we're playing with a bunch of dragons. One of my favorite stories is that, when I first met Patrick Chapin, we had this sort of conversation where he was like, you know what, man? He's like, when I first he found my work or found my content or whatever, he was like, you know what you were doing? Everybody else was playing with all these other cards. It didn't matter. So, you know what you were doing? He said, dude, you were brewing with Dragonstorm. And I was just like, yeah, I was. And it was awesome. And eventually that did become a fantastic deck in standard. Not my build per se, but I was playing with it and I had a lot of fun with seeding songs and stuff. But Dragonstorm is officially on Arena, which is great. Thanks to the historic anthology. We have Storm and Arena, everybody. For a red and 8 generic mana. It's 9 mana. It's a rare sorcery that says search your library for a dragon permanent card and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. And of course, it has Storm. When you cast the spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. There's a whole combo deck where back in the day, you got 4 Bogarden Hellkites. And these days, you put dragons in the graveyard and get them back out.
Yeah, these days it's Terror of the Peaks and 2 Bladewing the Risens.
Right. And just
so you put a terror into play and then you swap the Bladewings back and forth and deal infinite damage.
Until they die. There you go.
Yep. I died to that the other day. I was not happy about it.
Yeah. It's a hell of a Magic card, and Dragonstorm was included in Time Spiral as like lulz, right? It was like, this is silly, and it's a hilarious card. It's a Storm card that didn't do anything back in the day. It's like one of the only Storm cards that didn't do anything. So they're like, it's safe. It wasn't. See you at Worlds. All right, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that has been terrorizing formats since it was printed 2 years ago. it is one of, if not the most dominant standard red card in recent memory, if not memory. And I also have a very distinct recollection of my first time seeing this card in a older format. I saw this card in Burn, and I was like, every single other card in this Burn deck, in the main deck of this Burn deck, costs 1 mana. Why are we playing a 3 mana giant in our Burn deck? So, am I missing something here?
Oh.
Apparently I was, because nothing has run a format quite as much as Stomp into Bone Crusher Giant. Stomp is a generic and a red for an adventure instant. Damage can't be prevented this turn. Stomp deals 2 damage to any target. And Bone Crusher Giant is a 4/3 for 3 mana giant. Whenever Bone Crusher Giant becomes the target of a spell, Bone Crusher Giant deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. So very common play pattern is kill your opponent's turn 2 play a Bone Crusher Giant, and you've effectively drawn a card in the process because you haven't expended any additional resources from your hand.
Yes. And then it might shock them for them to get rid of it as well, which is helping your burn deck along the way. This is actually this is new news to me, seeing some play in more Eternal formats as well, not just in the Brawl decks. I actually got an easy 7 wins in the historic decathlon with the mono red list. There is an Alchemy card. That's a little 1/1 hasty raging goblin that makes a card in your hand also have haste. And then my turn 2 plays to stomp their thing. My turn 3 plays to then bash them in the face with another 4 power hasty creature. And it is very strong.
Pretty good.
I can't look. What they did was they made split cards, except you get both halves of the split card every time. You don't have to choose between the fire and ice. You get the fire and the ice. It's wonderful. And as a result,
and you don't even have to fuse them. You can pay one and then play the other.
Yeah. Whenever you wanted. And it was exiled, so you couldn't get it with discard. You couldn't get it with Wrath of God. You couldn't touch it. That Bone Crusher Giant's going to sit out there till whenever they want to pay 3 mana. And on rate, 3 mana for 3 is a fantastic rate. So they gave you like these are the type of cards that just literally define formats. Like literally, they tell you what is playable and what is not playable, why something is playable and why something is not playable. Like, can you beat Bone Crusher Giant? And this happens across all sorts of good cards in every format. But Lord knows this card was absolutely ridiculous. This was my number 10. It's hard to think of a red creature that defined its sort of era. And it was in everything. There was never like I've seen like red decks that don't necessarily have Goldsband Dragons or whatever. There was not a red deck in Standard that didn't have this card. There just wasn't. It just didn't.
People
exist.
are just splashing this card.
Yeah,
card is
like
bananas. Yeah. So Nerd Girl, what's your number 2?
So my number 2 is kind of an honorary slot. It's not super exciting, but it is one of the most impactful cards on the client, I think, and it's pretty new. And overall, I think it's one of the best removal spells money can buy. And that is Unholy Heat.
Nice.
This 1 mana instant spell, Unholy Heat, deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker with Delirium. Unholy Heat deals 6 damage instead if there are 4 or more cards among card types in your graveyard.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wizards, for making this deal 6 damage to kill Titans and friends. God, that's
kills
a
Titans,
number.
kills Nissa, who shakes the world.
Yes.
It does kill pretty much everything relevant has 5 or 6 toughness up till about 5 mana.
5+ mana, 6+ mana. And again, that's fine because there's just that number 6. If this had dealt 5, we'd still have a world that just Titans would not be scared of a removal spell you have. And at least now they do. It's a little something. It's not perfect, but it's a damn good removal spell.
And it's very flexible because you going into your match, you don't know what you're being paired up against. Sometimes that 2 damage to knock out their key piece of aggression in the goblins or in the flipping deck, Delver decks, like getting to hit those is super important. And then the Delirium is less. It's not too steep of a cost if you need the 6 damage because it takes a little bit more time for them to get that out there. So the flexibility in having removal for big things that don't cost so much that you get ran over by the cheap stuff is very, very important.
the decks that can very quickly get to that delirium also won't get outclassed in terms of size. Some of the problem that you have with things like Dragon's Rage Channeler is that you're going to get outclassed by bigger creatures early on. And this is able to take out those 3/4 angels, those early death shadows, things that you might be able to outclass your 3/3s or your 3/2s. This is able to take care of.
Yeah, it is wonderfully utility based, as it were. Good early, good late. So for my number 2 here, this is a card that has its own archetype. This is a card that defined its own archetype. This is a card that took about 4 seconds for everyone to go, man, I wonder if this card's good in older formats where you could just play a bunch of instants and sorceries for like nothing. Because art like Phoenix showed up in Guilds of Ravnica. This is a $25 foil, by the way. For a red and 3 generic mana, it is a 3/2 mythic Phoenix because of course it's mythic. Dang it. Of course it's Phoenix. Of course it's mythic. It has flying and haste. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've cast 3 or more instant and sorcery spells this turn, return Arc like Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. Hey, we just talked about Faithless Looting. I think that's a mondo and a combo there.
Right. Yeah, pretty
That's
good.
how that works. Yeah, this card's great.
This is my number 4.
Nice.
My number 9.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So it's impressive. It makes all the lists. I mean, it's definitely a very, very powerful card on Arena. It, has its own archetype for a reason, and it is dang scary. I've never been so scared to see an opponent cast an opt before. I'm always, it's like the graveyard check. They have an opt on the stack, and you're just like, oh no, how many things are in the graveyard? And you have this like sense of dread that you could just be dead, even though you're at starting life total. That is a thing.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is one of the first decks in a while that felt like a combo deck that was playable in standard. I mean, obviously the standard version of Phoenix wasn't nearly as explosive as, that's how standard works, but you still had things like Radical Idea. You still had Finale of Devastate. What was it? Finale of Promise. That's the one. And you had these, ways to get the Phoenix triggers to happen. Right. And it was a different deck, but it still felt like a combo deck, much less once you have access to opt and all the crazy cantrips.
Right. I mean, the idea that you can, create a combo-like feeling, but also attach it to a creature, I think that's great. Like more of that is awesome. We don't want the pure spell stuff that we talked about earlier, but like combo creatures, I think that's really cool. And this is a really good example of how they did that really nicely. All right. That means we're going to turn the corner here to our number 1. You know what? I'm just going to get my number 1 out of the way. As far as I can tell, it's not on any of y'all's list. This is, I guess, would you call it based? I don't even know what that word means anymore. What I would say,
talk to your kids.
I know, right? Children, explain cool to me. But this card to me is cool. It's timeless. It's the ultimate. Yes, it's default. You can even call it cringy. I don't care. My number 1 red card on Arena is Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is the classic card. It's 1 red mana for an instant that deals 3 damage to any target. It's been here since Alpha, baby, and it's on Arena as it should be.
Yeah, it is on Arena. I guess.
I had to craft rare wild cards for it. Pour one out for me. Thank you.
There's also a new 3/3 that shuffles for lightning bolts into your deck, which is very cool. And very cool. I've gotten to cast Lightning Bolt in limited thanks to the Strixhaven Mystical Archive. Yeah. Lightning Bolt is the OG. It was my number 1 red card back when we did the red cards period, just, back in the early part of Magic Mike's.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess.
Get over
it. I mean, I wasn't seeing it like, it wasn't something we could play in standard at the time, even though it was printed in the Strixhaven thing. So it didn't really dawn on me to like put this in Arena, even though it's technically there. We're not really seeing it, right?
It's in Brawl. There's a format I can play it.
I will not even good in Brawl.
And Brawl is also not a format I play in the slide.
Right.
Fine. Whatever.
I will say I did play the 3/3 that makes lightning bolts, and I think I made maybe 4 lightning bolts in my deck. I had 4 of them floating around from attacking. I drew 3 cards and drew 3 lightning bolts, and I was like, oh, I guess I will just 9 you for no reason at all and win the game. So I still had like 50 cards in my deck. It was like so pretty. Or I played it on 3, attacked, and then drew 3 cards. It was like, oh.
Never tell me the odds subreddit right
Love
there.
it.
Yeah.
I saw a screenshot recently of some guy that got 16 copies of Lightning Bolt's Test of Talented out of his deck. That was pretty good.
Wow.
I did see that, I think.
Wow. All right, then. Ruben, what's number 1?
My number 1 is a card that has been in Standard and that we've talked about on this show before. And I'm not sure it would have occurred to me for it to be my number 1 red card on Arena, except for that I think it has to be. For compared to everything else, nothing had as big of an effect on Standard, as big of an effect on older formats, is still in the cube, is just a good, solid role player, and has been printed again very recently and is in fact in Standard. My number 1 is Abrade.
Nice.
Okay.
Abrade is a generic and a red, where instant, where you choose one. You either deal 3 damage to a creature or you destroy target artifact.
Sweet. I no joke. Was talking earlier about my blue-red sort of mono brown deck I got from the Vintage Cube, and my 1 removal spell is Abrade in that deck.
Yeah,
because it's still great. It's still fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I love this in limited for sure. It would have never really occurred to me to put it onto any sort of constructed playable list. I will say in limited, it's one of the few answers to Edgar, which is one of my favorite things to do.
Please die, Edgar. Thanks.
Yeah. Crack the coffin open.
And they feel real bad when you kill it with an Abrade. Like a bleed dry, they expect. An Abrade always
gets them every time.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, this is just a hell of a Magic card. Like, this was one of those cards that, again, I think sort of turned a corner on how powerful they were okay with modal spells being. Like, this was another one of those little pushes of like, okay, now it's a sweet removal spell and it destroys artifacts to keep, weird stuff in check, basically. So they could also make really powerful artifacts, and you have the answer right there. You're playing it anyway. And that's fantastic. Nerd Girl, by process of elimination, your number 1 must be my number 8. So tell us all about it.
That makes sense. So again, I think this is one of the most impactful cards that have come out more recently.
It's true.
It was not printed for Standard, but again, just kind of came out of nowhere and is being played in a ton of decks, has its own archetype, and does everything you want your decks to do in Standard, regardless of having this card, and kind of enables the engine for so many things. And that is Dragon's Rage Channeler, this 1 mana 1/1. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can surveil 1. So you're going to use that to fill up your graveyard and do all the things. And once you have Delirium, as long as you have 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, Dragon's Rage Channeler gets +2/+2 and has flying and attacks each combat if able. So this is a 1 mana 3/3 flyer that gives you card selection, fuels your other abilities, your other Delirium cards like Heated Debate, and is just a pretty big beater that can close out games very quickly, and ran side by side with cards like Delver, thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, this is a huge engine, and you're getting to do a ton of things. You're scrying with this to flip your Delver and to do a bunch of stuff, and it feels amazing.
Yeah, goes great with Arclight Phoenix as well. So he's playing that deck to fill up your graveyard. Right. Goes great with Delver, obviously. Goes great with Ragavan alongside in those Modern Horizons 2 tribal decks as well.
I mean, Ragavan goes good with Ragavan.
Sure.
Just 4 Ragavan starts any deck
both,
list off.
Both great tastes that taste great together.
Absolutely. Again, this was on my list for a reason. And I mean, this Magic, like, this card just has so much value. Like, this is a $2.50 uncommon for a reason. It's value on value on value. You cast a non-creature spell, you power up its Delirium really early, you get a 3/3 monster that keeps attacking. Like, literally your drawback is, I guess I can't block with my 3/3, usually like this turn, because the first turn you played, if it's already Delirium turned on, then you still have a 1 mana 3/3 blocker that flies, which is awesome. And again, like, multiples of these, the ability stacks around surveilling, which is fantastic. Like, it's good coming, it's good going, it's terrific.
This card also did one of the things that I liked the best in Modern Horizons 2, which is combining keywords that were never meant to see the light of day together. There's a couple of these that they sort of combined weird keywords together, and this is one of my favorites.
I love it. All right. That said, that was our top 10 cards, our top 10 red cards on Arena. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
I'm shocked we didn't get into a red zone argument in this episode.
Oh, so shocked, huh? Red zone.
See, because shocked,
red.
and then
All right.
red zone,
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlderSleeves.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.